BYU throttled by Texas Tech. And guess what? It is not all bad news, BYU fans.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network that is out there. And yeah, it was another day of madness. The ACC has cemented itself as a one-bid league. That's just a reality that Jim Phillips is going to have to accept. Indiana and Oregon with some dog fights on the road in the Big Ten. But we start with the game of the week. And boy, in my fan mood assessment, no one should feel better than Texas Tech right now. I don't know who would feel better after this week. You had waited so long, over a decade, to see GameDay return to Lubbock. You had your famous alum, maybe your most famous alum in the football sense, in town as the guest picker on GameDay, which YouTube TV customers did not get a chance to see. And then everything about this game said Texas Tech should win. Texas Tech needed a win more than BYU. And then Texas Tech went and was just way better. This game, final score, by the way, 29-7, could have been worse if BYU didn't have a good defense and hadn't held Texas Tech to field goals in several spots. If Texas Tech had taken points before the half, which I thought they should have done, they would have won 32-7. So Texas Tech just completely obliterates BYU. Now, one game is not enough for me to honestly come on here and tell you that BYU got exposed. See? Vegas always knows. It was a 10.5 point. They blew them out. BYU's hanging on by a thread. Nope. That's not what I'm coming on here to say. The unfortunate part, I didn't say it was all good news, BYU fans, just to be clear. This could feel eerily similar to a season ago, where BYU started 9-0. This year it was 8-0. Then they lose a game late. And then they lost another game late. Now here's the opportunity to showcase your growth as a program. BYU controls its own fate to make the college football playoff. BYU will drop in my rankings. They will not drop outside of the top 12. Absolutely, positively not. And I'll just tell you right now, for my top 25, I will move Notre Dame down. Not because they did anything wrong necessarily against Navy, but because I had him too high coming into this week. Just wanted to make that very clear. But for BYU in this game, are great teams not allowed a dud, a mulligan? That just wasn't right. Texas Tech lost to Arizona State. Arizona State's not a top 25 team right now. Alabama lost to Florida State, who lost to Clemson today. Florida State has one ACC win in a conference that, as I'll talk about later, is sending just the one team to the college football playoff. That'll be whoever the conference champion is. I'm excited to watch that race, but the ACC did itself no favors by beating up on their own. But BYU, I think you're going to see some people, and I hope you don't. You're not hearing me do this. I'm doing the exact opposite of this. You could reasonably hear some folks say, see, BYU's not elite. BYU's just lucky. BYU's this. You have a chance to go prove that that isn't the case. You have got two real opponents in the next couple of games. TCU at home at LaVell Edwards Stadium. TCU's a good football team. Cincinnati on the road, good football team. UCF at home, respectable football team. Not great. BYU should be fine against UCF. So you control your own path to the playoff, and you have the ability to showcase that this was your one-off game. Bad performance, not a good showing. Indiana almost had that today. In no world do I think it is an honest discussion to look at what BYU has done this year and say, Texas Tech exposed them for the frauds that they're never this. Nope. This is how I expected the game to go. I thought Texas Tech would win. Yeah, that BYU would keep it closer. But was I shocked that Texas Tech pulled away? No. I think Texas Tech is a more complete football team than BYU. That's true. It doesn't mean BYU isn't a good team. And what I talked about going into this game was that BYU has done the situational things very well. And because that doesn't always result in gaudy numbers, the analytics might not like BYU as much, or certain segments of the college football fan base might not like the Cougars as much. But you have to get credit when you do those things right. Because how many times Nebraska with Scott Frost, USC last year with Lincoln Riley, I could go on, do we see teams that aren't that good not pull out close games over and over? So yeah, BYU got beat. Alabama still hasn't lost an SEC game. And they lost to a 1-win Florida State team. They had a really bad week. So yeah, I can still view you as a really good team, even though you had a bad week, which Texas Tech made BYU have. So in my reaction show fan mood assessment here for BYU, we are not at the worst of vibes on my 5-point scale. I'm tempted to put this in a no vibes department. I'll go bad vibes for one reason only. One reason only. And that's that the timing is going to call a bunch of fans back to last year when they lost twice down the stretch and didn't make the playoff. The good news, Utah has 2 losses and you beat them head to head. Now in the Big 12 championship game picture, that doesn't matter for no good reason. But in the playoff rankings, it might. So at least there's that. But the good news for BYU fans, you control your own fate to go to the playoff. Nobody to blame but yourselves going forward. Let's flip over and talk about Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a team that has invested very heavily to be good, and they are good. And for those who like to mock Texas Tech, or my affinity for the Red Raiders, over the summer months and spring months when I pointed out, hey, this is a good team that is getting way better on paper doesn't always translate to results on the field. For Texas Tech, it is. When Baron Morton has played, they have not played a one-possession game. They are rolling through everybody in this conference right now. And the potential for someone to beat them in the Big 12 championship game and be a bid stealer of sorts in the college football playoff picture, I don't know how realistic that is. Texas Tech's schedule going forward is as follows. They play UCF at home next week. Then they have a bye, and then they play at West Virginia. I don't know. Look, anything feels possible when Penn State was one drive away from beating Indiana today. I'll talk about that later on today's show. But Texas Tech is just living up to the billing. A lot of teams look good on paper, Penn State, and then don't have the proper coaching. But Joey McGuire and his staff are doing a phenomenal job. They are maximizing the Texas Tech Red Raiders roster. They are maximizing the money that went into building the best defensive line in the Big 12. They wreaked havoc against a good BYU O-line. And we said coming in, meaning me. I say it as if there's a team here at Locked On College Football. It's just me. Going into this game, I said Texas Tech needs to find a way to do the little things better than BYU, because that's what the Cougars usually hang their hat on, and then they did. They just did. The fumbled punt early in the game. Turnovers. Those are the sorts of things BYU always had to go their way. Texas Tech flipped the script, and then Texas Tech has a better roster top to bottom. BYU doesn't have a bad one, but Texas Tech has the best one in the Big 12. They established that yet again. And with all the stakes, anticipation, and buildup for this game, yeah, my fan mood assessment, highest of vibes for Texas Tech after that particular game. A trouncing on game day always feels good. You're 2 wins from the Big 12 championship game and 2 wins from the college football playoff, regardless of what happens in Arlington. If Texas Tech wins their final 2, I expect they will. They'll be in the college football playoff. I wouldn't want to see them because their defensive front can get after you. Baron Morton can make plays. They're explosive in the run game. They can be in the pass game. And Jacob Rodriguez is the best linebacker in all of college football. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter. Chaos in the ACC has sealed the conference's fate. First, this episode brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. If you need parts fast for a project, Supply House has next-day delivery. It does not get more game-changing than that, unless maybe you're talking about Jacob Rodriguez in Texas Tech. That's a game-changing player, but next-day delivery will be game-changing for your business. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. So earlier this week, I want to call you back to a couple of things that I pointed out. First of all, I mentioned that either Vanderbilt or Virginia was going down. I flipped a coin in my head. I went with Vanderbilt. They prevailed in overtime in an incredible football game. By the way, Hugh Freeze leaves and Auburn's offense goes for more points than it has in a game that means something this season. Coincidence, is it? Boy, it seems a little sketchy. But between Virginia and Vanderbilt, I was confident, hey, one of these teams is going down. Well, it winds up being Virginia. Oh, Cal was inexplicably, I thought about this as a best bet, but I was just terrified. I didn't understand. Vegas was either off its rocker or the smartest thing that we've ever seen. Turns out in this example, off its rocker. Cal was an 18.5-point underdog. I thought Jaren Kiave Sangopolatele wasn't going to play. I thought he was perhaps hurt, that something that I didn't know was taking place. And nope, Vegas just thought that, and they went to Louisville and won outright in overtime on 4th and goal. Went for it, could have gone for the tie. Wilcox rolls the dice, maybe with his job on the line, and comes up with a win. The highest of vibes for Cal fans after that game on my 5-point scale, because how much better can it feel than beating a top 15 team on the road? But here's the problem. The ACC is getting one team in the playoff. There is no way for them to recoup what happened this weekend. Virginia going down at home to Wake Forest. Jake Dickert should probably be the ACC Coach of the Year, or at least in the running, because the Demon Deacons are bowl eligible and they've still got 3 games to go. They're 3-3 in conference play. You realize that Wake Forest has the same conference record, has a half game better conference record right now than Clemson? Who could have, imagine if I'd predicted that before the year. I would have been called insane, non-knower of ball. And I'm not saying I predicted it. I'm just pointing out how crazy it is that happened. That is this thing that exists right now. Wake Forest has beaten SMU and now Virginia on the road. The Cavaliers' offense inexplicably disappeared against the Wake Forest defense. Credit the Demon Deacons, but the lowest of vibes for Virginia fans, and the same for Louisville fans. Because you now look up and realize there is no way, unless you win the ACC, that you're going to make the college football playoff. Now, that's possible. So if you want to view that as a silver lining, you can. But you had Louisville as a one-loss team in the ACC, Virginia as a one-loss team in the ACC. They just suffered their first actual conference loss against Wake Forest here. It's not going to happen. And you know what? It shouldn't happen. I'm not coming on here and saying it's wrong. I'm coming on here and saying I preemptively agree with what I expect the committee to do. And I'm going to talk about the Group of 5 playoff race on tomorrow's show because, boy, I apparently set off some very passionate, I respect it. Just want to make that clear. But I set off a passionate corner of the internet by declaring Tulane the Group of 5 playoff favorite after this week. That's what they will be in my rankings. We'll see if the committee agrees, but that's for Monday's show. For today, let's talk about the ACC and the position they're in. So Miami throttles Syracuse. Okay, nothing to see here. 38-10. The Hurricanes wind up winning. So they're 3-2 in the ACC, and Virginia's 5-1, and Louisville's 4-2. But then you go, wait a minute, could SMU do it again? Yep. That's what happened here. That's what has happened. SMU's losses have not been in conference play except for one to Wake Forest, but they lost to TCU and Baylor. And SMU was a team before the season that I talked about as a team with the potential to get an at-large bid for the ACC. Well, obviously they can't do that, but they have just one conference loss on a 50-plus yard field goal. But that's also reflected to Wake Forest. That's also reflective of how weak the ACC is. That's just the way. 2 losses to Big 12 teams that are well, TCU is good. Baylor is not. SMU lost to them both. And SMU might be the team I'd take right now to go make the college football playoff. They've done it before. I've got proof of concept. They made it a season ago. They have to win the conference championship game this time, which, of course, they failed to do last season, but sometimes you learn more from your losses than you do from your wins. So Virginia came into this week at 14, Louisville at 15. When you lose at home to unranked ACC teams, boy, I haven't settled on my top 25 and how far I'm going to drop them yet. I bet the committee punishes them severely. Severely. I saw some backlash flying around online. By the way, it didn't help that Duke, I thought they would not cover 9.5, but they lost on the road to UConn, who's 5-0 at home. Jim Mora Jr., what a coaching job he's doing there for the Huskies. But that's not an ACC game. That's just a game that happened that, again, shows what I'm talking about here, that the ACC right now is clearly fourth. The committee saw that going into their first playoff rankings, and they are going to be able to double down in a big way. Because when you have the non-conference resume that the ACC has in this season, 2025, you do not get benefit of the doubt of maybe our bottom tier teams are just good. Nope, because where are the quality wins? They don't exist. They are just simply not out there. I mean, the best ACC non-conference win is probably Miami over Notre Dame. And Miami has since lost twice. And now one of those losses looks worse because it was to Louisville at home. So the glimmer of hope for 2 ACC teams going into the playoff, not that I think it'll matter. I don't think any of these teams are getting past the maybe quarterfinals. Maybe. You get the wrong matchup. The ACC team, like last year, could be one and done. Both SMU and Clemson lost in the first round. I don't see a team right now that I feel confident enough is able to get past a first round playoff game. Now it's matchup dependent. But the ACC right now is going to be a spoiler. That's what's going to happen here. The ACC champ is going to, unless it's Georgia Tech, it's going to feel like a spoiler. And that is the one potential saving grace that the ACC has. I believe it will wind up being a one-bid league. But if Georgia Tech, even then I don't know, because Georgia Tech has one loss. Their non-conference game was at Colorado, and they won that game. They won that game, but Georgia Tech's probably going to have another loss on the schedule. They play Georgia later this year. They almost won last season, so maybe they'll be able to do it again. But they've also got to play Pitt. And next week, I suppose I should say, they go at Boston College. So if Georgia Tech wins the next 3 games, yeah, it could happen. Other than that scenario, that's the glimmer of hope for the ACC, is you need Georgia Tech to wind up 11-1. 11-1 with a win over Georgia is into the college football playoff no matter what. I will scream that from the not scream, because if I scream into this microphone, then that's not going to be a pleasant experience for you, and I'm trying to give you something that you enjoy, not something you have to endure. Thank you for being here, by the way. So I think that if Georgia Tech goes 11-1, there will be, understandably, a huge groundswell of support. And then if they were to lose the ACC championship game, then whoever would have beaten them in this hypothetical gets in automatically, and Georgia Tech would be in at 11-2. There's no way you keep out an 11-win Georgia Tech team with a win over the Georgia Bulldogs. That would be a miscarriage of justice to the highest degree in the college football playoff era. Does it feel like that's even likely, though? Because remember, Georgia Tech has to avoid a look-ahead spot the game before on November 22nd against Pitt, who's in the top 25 and is playing much better football since they made a quarterback change earlier this year. So Virginia, second loss. Louisville, second loss. There's nothing about the resume of these teams that says you're going to be an at-large. Miami being at 18, which I contended and do continue to say is too low in the initial college football playoff rankings, tells us that the committee is not going to look at the ACC and view any of them as legitimate playoff threats at 10-2. And I don't know that I can blame them. The non-conference games have to matter, and the ACC flopped for the most part. So the ACC's fate, I think, is sealed. Indiana, Oregon. Oh, did you... Catch of the year. First, this episode brought to you by DoorDash. It is the weekend. Let's look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. Omar Cooper. Oh my gosh. Is that the catch of the year in college football? Right now, it seems that way. Indiana still would have been in control of its own destiny to make the playoff, but man, I tell you what, that was an great throw by Mendoza, getting hit as he lets it go. But I tell you what, that catch in the back of the end zone by Omar Cooper, the footwork and technique required. You cannot deliver a tougher catch in a bigger moment unless you're talking about Odell Beckham on Sunday Night Football. And even that, because it's the NFL, didn't have the same stakes as what we saw in Happy Valley on Saturday. Almost a stunning upset. Instead, a thrilling victory for the Hoosiers. Just like Omar Cooper delivered for Indiana, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day. Only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Check out DoorDash today. I could not believe this was happening. Penn State, that has thrown in the towel, interim head coach, season's over, backup quarterback, Ethan Grunkmeyer's out there, putting the number 2 team in the country on the ropes. I love this sport more than life itself sometimes. Because sometimes you just can't explain what's happening, and you just have to sit there and enjoy it. Like Penn State losing to UCLA. Who lost? That was the only best bet I lost this week. I'm officially over 500 on the year. It has been a long journey to get here. I hope we can stay there. But the best bets went 5-1 this week. And UCLA was the lone disappointment. At home to Nebraska, backup quarterback. Good vibes win there for the Cornhuskers. But the Hoosiers find a way to get this done. Omar Cooper, this is an unbelievable catch. The only touchdown that Fernando Mendoza threw, his stat line looked very similar to the one he had, and the team scored just 3 points less against Oregon earlier this year. It doesn't always blow you away, and this applies to Dante Moore and what he did at Iowa, who we'll talk about in a moment. But Fernando Mendoza and the Hoosiers, situationally, going back to what I was talking about with BYU earlier, are brilliant. That game against Oregon, they won on the road. That was a tie game in the fourth quarter. Mendoza threw a pick 6 early in the fourth quarter to tie it. You were watching, I was watching, And most of us probably thought, oh, now Oregon's going to figure it out at home. They'll get the play. Okay, they got. Nope. Indiana responded. And Indiana gets down on the road against Penn State here, and they responded when they needed to. Their defense got the stop they required, and the offense goes down the field. And this catch from Omar Cooper, if you haven't seen it, I don't know what college football game you watched on Saturday that somehow, or what slate of games you watched that didn't include Indiana's near upset at Penn State. This catch in the back of the end zone to tiptoe as he did, simply incredible. The footwork required, and this is a skill that you don't hear get talked about in recruiting profiles or NFL draft scouting reports, anything like that. But this is a skill that some receivers have and others don't. Omar Cooper's clearly got it. The ability to toe tap in a tight spot, especially with the game on the line. When you are on the precipice of a shocking upset that throws your entire season up for debate, instead of being in your own hands. It would have mostly been in their own hands, but whether they get a home playoff game or a bye, that would not have been, right? Unless they were to go to the Big Ten. It would throw a lot of doubt and uncertainty into it. To make this play in that spot, there might have been more difficult looking catches in college football this year. I'm sure you could find some. I don't think you will find a more tactically and situationally difficult catch to make than what Omar Cooper made. And in a game where Elijah Surratt didn't go, you have to be able to find a way to step up. This is why recruiting matters. This is why depth matters so much. Those can be generalized, overused platitudes in the offseason and leading up to a particular year, and you don't know if it's ever going to show up. And sometimes it doesn't, because teams stay really healthy. But as I'll talk about with Oregon in a moment, it does indeed matter a whole heck of a lot. Having a number 2 option like this that can make that sort of play is a pretty awesome thing for Indiana fans to have. Now, this is a no vibes, you escaped with a win, avoided the upset sort of game. I don't know what Penn State fans did to annoy the football gods, that they can't have a single nice thing, but apparently they did something. I don't know what. Maybe they gave James Franklin too long of a leash, and they're just being punished for that, which seems unfair, but you know what? That's the way it feels, because they almost had something to hold on to from a disastrous season, and they don't have anything. Indiana's got Wisconsin. Don't sleep on them, I guess. Ask Washington. And then Purdue on the road. Yeah, they're going to roll, and they're going to go to the Big Ten championship game. They are going to play Michigan. See what I did there? I'm just kidding. They're going to play Ohio State, obviously. So they're going to play Ohio State, and I can't wait to watch that football game. It's going to be really, really fun. I think you're going to have a couple of 12-0 teams in Indianapolis this year. So, speaking of depth, Oregon went to Iowa, and without DeCorian Moore, their leading receiver, Kenyon Sadiq, their number 1 future NFL tight end, Alex Harkey, their right tackle, and several other players, questionable or limited, found a way to win on a last-second field goal. And this was just a Big Ten classic at Kinnick. And Oregon deserves a lot of credit for the way they figured out a way. It's probably too late, and I should go to bed now, but just give me a couple minutes on this. They deserve a lot of credit, because I was down on Iowa coming into the year. And yeah, this is a bad vibes outcome, maybe even a worst vibes outcome for Iowa, for Iowa fans, depending on who you are, because you're not going to the college football playoff and you had a chance. Your defense was on the field, up by 1, at home, tough weather. It's the perfect stereotypical Iowa spot. And then Dante Moore throws an absolute laser, seems like too broad of a description, so why don't we say fine point laser? Does that work? To Malik Benson, Oregon kicks a game-winning field goal and rips the hearts out of the chests of tens of thousands of Iowa fans at Kinnick. I was wrong on Iowa coming into this year. I was down through the first couple games. I thought this is the Iowa team I expected to see. I don't think they're very good, but they have played some good football this year. And they went up against an Oregon team that I think is really good. I don't know if they're national championship good, but they're definitely playoff caliber, and Iowa was right there. And I have called into question whether Kirk Ferentz should continue being the guy for the Hawkeyes. And I think those questions can be asked, but there are a lot better answers in the affirmative of yes, he can still get this done because of performances like this and the offense taking tangible strides forward. More need to be taken, but a lot of good things have happened for Iowa this year, and they can still end the season at 9-3. I think they'll probably wind up at 8-4. I think they'll lose at USC next week and then win their last couple games of the season. But for Oregon to find a way, the depth at wide receiver came up big. A true freshman made a catch on the final drive to go win the game. A redshirt freshman made 2 catches on that drive. And a guy who was featured a lot early in the year and hasn't been featured as much lately, bunch of injuries popped up, boom, you got to find a way to step up. And Iowa's offense actually made the drive in this game. Mark Gronowski made a couple of big-time plays, and it was the defense that couldn't quite come through. And that's a strange place for Iowa fans to be, but they deserve credit for the way that they have taken tangible steps forward and addressed. They're not all the way there, but you know the defense will always be good as long as you have Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker in place. And the offense strides. Last year, better than the year before. This year, better than last year. They have moved in a forward direction, and they deserve full credit for that. And Oregon deserves a lot of credit for going on the road and winning, because that's a good Iowa team. Not a playoff team, but a good Iowa team that was ranked for a reason. And I don't think they're even falling out of my top 25 after the loss, because 2 of their losses are by a combined 7 points to top 10 teams, one of whom is the number 2 team in the country. So that's how we wrap today's show. Plenty more coming tomorrow. Washington upset by Wisconsin. What in the world? Jed Fish just can't coach away from Seattle. Does that make him not Florida's next head coach? Tune in tomorrow to find out. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.